Elon Musk voluntarily released an insane mood that all his attorneys told him don't do that. When he bought Twitter, he found there millions of documents that showed collusion between the White House and Twitter employees on censorship. And instead of kind of burning them or going through them, parsing through them carefully, and he invited Matt Taibbi and Paul Thacker, these great, the last living investigative journalists, and a bunch of other journalists, and he gave him a room and he said, here's all the documents, do whatever you want with them. And his lawyers were just screaming, you can't do that. And, I will always love Elon because he did that. It was such a bold, brazen move. And it was, I asked him why you do that. And he said, look, I grew up in South Africa. I moved here. And I moved here partially because of the First Amendment, because I love the freedom of this country. And he said, I'm a citizen of this country now. I have a lot of money. I could buy houses all over the world. Everything I own is here. And I want this country to be what it's supposed to be. I used to write a lot for the New York Times for their op-ed page. Every time I publish these little 750-word stories on their op-ed page, I'd spend maybe an hour, 45 minutes or an hour on the phone with attorneys for the New York Times that were vetting every line in there to make sure that if I said something that was vaguely defamatory, I had an adequate source and I could prove the truth of the matter asserted, etc. So they have to do that with every article that's published. A lawyer has to read every article that the New York Times publishes before it appears in print. Why is that? Because if I said something defamatory in my article on the editorial page, the person who was defamed could sue not just me. Mm-hmm. They could sue the New York Times. And so if Twitter had to do that, if Facebook had to do that, if Google had to do that,
they'd have to censor us to oblivion, basically, to avoid lawsuits. Not only
censor, but they'd have to have lawyers vetting
right.
every post, from everybody, the billion posts a day. They couldn't do it. Mark Zuckerberg said it's existential. So Congress included this provision called Section 230 that makes them immune. Well, the White House was threatening these platforms that if you don't censor RFK and other people, that we're going to go after your Section 230 immunity. And that is existential for them. So, of course, they complied. But that, listen, Facebook and Twitter can censor me all they want. And they should censor stuff. They should censor, there's pedophilia or, people inciting violence. Yeah, they should censor them. But when the government is telling them to censor them, then the First Amendment is implicated.
So let me ask you something that I asked Jim Jordan at the Capitol about just that. So the government put pressure on a corporation to silence you. That is, by most legal standards, that would be a violation of the First Amendment. They had my tweets taken down. That's a violation of the First Amendment. But nothing happens, and there is no recourse. And Jim Jordan said, you're never going to get a note. No one's going to pat you on the back or anything else. And I think that people understanding that they do it and they get away with it, and then they do it again, that has led to so many people just thinking, oh, the system just doesn't work, and there's just no point in any of this. How do you overcome that hurdle?
Well, with my case, I actually won the case. I got an injunction against President Biden, so I did get the note.
So you got the note?
Yeah.
Wow, I want to see the note.
I mean,
yeah. But okay, so you got a note.
A note of apology from the president, but I got a judge saying, slapping their wrists and saying, you can't do that anymore. And then there's a companion case to my case called Biden versus Kennedy, or Kennedy versus Biden. And then the companion case is Murthy versus Biden, which was brought by Jeff Landry, who's the Kentucky or the Louisiana Attorney General, and then Eric Schmidt, who is the Missouri Attorney General. And that really good case, and they did a really good job on discovery. And that's the one with the Twitter files, which Elon Musk voluntarily released an insane mood that all his attorneys told him don't do that. When he bought Twitter, he found millions of documents that showed collusion between the White House and Twitter employees on censorship. And instead of kind of burning them or going through them, parsing through them carefully, and he invited Matt Taibbi and Paul Thacker, these great, the last living investigative journalists, and a bunch of other journalists, and he gave him a room and he said, here's all the documents, do whatever you want with them. And his lawyers were just screaming, you can't do that. And, I will always love Elon because he did that. It was such a bold, brazen move. And it was, I asked him why you do that. And he said, look, I grew up in South Africa. I moved here. And I moved here partially because of the First Amendment, because I love the freedom of this country. And he said, I'm a citizen of this country now. I have a lot of money. I could buy houses all over the world. I don't. Everything I own is here. And I want this country to be what it's supposed to be. So it was a very extraordinary conversation. Now let me say this. Elon is censoring stuff all over Europe. Because in Europe now, censorship is just out of control. Mm-hmm. I think they give you a $50 million fine if you write something contrary to official medical recommendations. So if you criticize mRNA vaccines, you pay millions of dollars in fines. So all the social media companies are buckling under. Mm-hmm. China, you have to buckle under, and Twitter does whatever it's told over there. But in this country, Elon is, at this point, standing up for free speech. And I think that's great. And it's particularly great because, his whole livelihood depends on government contracts. SpaceX is virtually 100% dependent on government contracts. And even Twitter, all the social media companies are tied in with the intelligence agencies. And so what he's done, I think, is particularly courageous. But anyway, because of what he did, which is to release all these documents, and the Missouri Attorney General and Jeffrey Landry from Louisiana got all these other documents from Facebook and from Instagram and from Google that corroborated that this was happening across the whole landscapes, that the White House was hammering these companies and ordering them to censor. And that's how we know what was happening. Otherwise, we wouldn't know anything about it. But, so I did win, and I got an injunction against the White House censoring.
But there's no apology note from Biden. But you get something from the lawyer. Mm-hmm. But okay, so when you brought that up, so we played that clip. I thought it was extraordinary, the clip with you and Aaron Burnett, because it was a moment of truth happening on CNN, and there's so little truth. So when you have that moment with her, and then do you just walk out of there and go, okay, I'll just keep playing ball there? It's interesting because you are doing really well with the online world. That's where you're having long conversations and agreeing to disagree with people. And when I had you on last time, we disagreed about a couple things. It's fine. But then you go on to these other shows and it's like it struck me like she didn't really know how to respond to hearing something that was counter. And that isn't the job of the journalists that you just described.
No. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say anything negative about Aaron Burnett because I think she is probably getting lambasted for letting me on. And she actually, she was going to have me on just for 10 minutes. And for one reason or another, she kept me on for 29 minutes. And she had a lot of other clips that she was going to show me, the way she does it. She has clips of my family bad-mouthing me or whatever, and she plays those clips and says, what do you think? So she had a bunch of those lined up. That's journalism. Yeah. That's fair. But she said at the end, I had so many other things I really wanted to talk to you about. She very, very differs with me on Ukraine. I'm pretty sure she differs with me on Gaza. And she told me specifically, I wanted to talk to you about those issues. So I'm hoping she has me back. I'm hoping she doesn't get into too much trouble.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.